Yeah, I'm Mike. I'm a VFX animator. I'm currently at Spin VFX. Before that, I was at Scanline, Digital Domain, and at BC. And I got to the industry 2 years now. Before that, I taught martial arts, did some motion graphic stuff, graduated from Alfred in 2014, and graduated high school in 2010. Quick version.
Yeah, and just because I know I can put a focus on it, can you talk a little bit more about your current studio that you work for and any projects that a general audience might be aware of?
Yeah, so Spin was originally out of Toronto. They're still there now, but they recently are opened a studio in Atlanta, so that's where I'm at their Atlanta studio. Projects that they've worked on, they've done Stranger Things, everybody knows, Umbrella Academy, Raised by Wolves. They recently worked on Doctor Strange, the new one. And what we're doing now, I can't say. Super cool stuff, though.
You'd have to take us
really
out.
exciting.
The Animator Mafia. You know too much.
Super Mario 2. I'm muted. Super Mario 2, Mario Goes to Hell.
Yeah, so Mario vs. Avengers.
It could be the next one.
That could be a thing, right?
The MCU versus the MCU. Or the NCU.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's been
yes.
been really fun so far.
Well, sweet. Thanks for sharing. And Aiden, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing now as well?
Yeah, I'm Aiden. I grew up around the Ellicottville, Cattaraugus County area, Western New York. Went to Alfred State. Now I'm working as an animator in Vancouver, which is a 3-hour time difference. So thanks for everyone for accommodating for a weird recording schedule, I suppose. And right now I'm working at Walt Disney Animation in Vancouver. And before that, I was at Sony Pictures Imageworks doing visual effects animation, or VFX anim. And I also cannot talk about what project I'm on right now, but previously I was working on Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Would be like the main big notable project. Oh, and then also before that, I also worked at Scanline for a little bit. I worked on the Meg to the Trench, which just got a trailer out recently.
Awesome. And I also remember you worked on Mother a little bit too.
Yeah, that was a while ago. Oh,
yeah.
Goodness. So this was back when I was studying at Alfred State. This is what started as an internship role immediately became you're hired because we need someone to like use this very specific tool. I wasn't working as an animator. I was a rotoscoper. So the idea is the movie's called Mother, stars Jennifer Lawrence, directed by Darren Aronofsky. There's a lot of close-up shots of Jennifer Lawrence's face. And in those close-up shots, you've got makeup artists that try and do a lot of like, appealing work on the actresses, make them look really good, but they can only do so much. And so after it's been filmed, they might in post do digital removal of blemishes or anything like that to make them look even more unrealistic. Mm-hmm. So that was my first job in the industry, technically, doing some blemish removal on Jennifer Lawrence, who probably does not need my help to make her look good.
Yeah, well, so establishing some ties here, because I also went to Alfred State and graduated with you. And I remember you were working with like puppets and hiding the strings.
Yeah, that was the same company. So the company was called Was it Empire VFX? Yeah, it was Empire VFX based in Buffalo, New York. I might be wrong. I apologize if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure the company doesn't exist anymore. Again, if you guys are still out there, my apologies. But there was also another project that I started doing right afterwards. That was for Julie's Green Room, which is like a Netflix puppet show. Exactly like you said, the puppets, they have wires and strings. So kind of like what I was doing with the blemishes, just go in and digitally erase those wires and strings. So this was like way back, first jobs in the industry, doing rotoscoping, digital altercation, stuff like that. The actual animation job, those are harder to come by and didn't start until after graduating from college, after going through online school and moving out to Vancouver is when I started getting the well and truly like animation work.
I mean, that's fantastic because especially for me, kind of being a layman when it comes to the field of animation and VFX, When I saw you doing some of that in high school, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so freaking cool. And
Yeah.
and then later when worked with Mike, just seeing what you could do with like a 2D penguin and
Oh,
and then
goodness.
and then transfer it into a 3D penguin and copy paste it like 6 times and make them all emote slightly different to give them completely different personalities. And that was just beautiful. I was blown away. I'm like, this world, the creative juices that you have to do it are just insane. So I'll ask you, Mike, because Aiden listed a couple projects that he has worked on that are probably pretty well known. You want to throw out any projects that you've worked on that are more well known?
Yeah, sure. So the first project that I was a part of getting into the industry was Thor: Love and Thunder, and I did post-viz animation on it, which is, um, I guess you can kind of think of it like making a blueprint for the visual effects artist to follow later on.
Hmm.
So it's like the director, they'll film the entire movie, give it to the third floor, which is the company I was with, and we do like slap effects. So it's just like really rough, unrendered effects, so the director can see like a really fast version of what the film is going to look like. It's just a way to iterate really fast to get the movie going along more quick. So that was the first thing I did. And then I worked on Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, which is on Disney Plus, which was a lot of fun. From there, I did Black Panther 2, cleaning up a lot of mocap. Got to animate a shot with Ironheart, which was awesome. And then from there, I worked on Three Body Problem, which is the upcoming Netflix show that just got a trailer released, which is looking amazing. I'm super excited for that. And yeah, I think that's about it. I had a small part in Dungeons and Dragons too.
Oh, nice.
sweet.
I like that movie.
Yeah. I didn't do a whole lot. I did worked on the section where the spoiler warning coming up for anybody who hasn't seen the film. I worked on the part where the fat dragon gets stuck in the cave.
Oh, that's such a good one.
Yeah. That's it. That's all I did on that film. I didn't do a whole lot.
Was it for like, okay, so like the dragon, it's very fat.
Hmm.
So like when you're animating that scene, were you manipulating like all like the fat jiggle stuff, or was that like more simulated?
No, that was simulated, but there were controls on there, so like I could like rotate and it would move like a rig does. And the
Yeah.
rig was like a fat dragon. It was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of the fat jiggle stuff was like simulation.
Yeah. Have you guys seen the movie?
No, that spoiler
Oh.
ruined everything about it.
Yeah, that's
I know.
true. It's literally unwatchable now.
Yeah, it's unwatchable.
Can
Yeah.
never enjoy it. Thanks, guys. Should have plugged my
I
ears.
ruined the end.
Well, I also want to throw out, because you did mention, Mike, that you did karate, and I want to do a special shout out because you worked at AKT Studios, which is a pretty well-known local studio.
Yeah. I was a fourth degree black belt through AKT. I was chief instructor when I was there, and I still teach. When I come back, I'll go to the classes and help Desmond White. He's the owner now.
Hell yeah, I love Desmond.
Yeah, he's a good dude. So Desmond, if you're listening, love you.
So-
Yes.
But yeah, so I taught with them for 7 years before moving to Montreal. And like I said, I'm still in contact with them. I still sign on to like their classes and can kind of view the classes through Zoom. So I'm still very much connected to AKT.
Sweet. Well, that's awesome. I'm really happy for you, and that you're able to continue to connect with them. Now, and I'll start with Aiden first, actually. What inspired you, a little Western New Yorker, what inspired you to go into animation at all?
Oh goodness. So when I was young, I really liked comics. Not so much superhero comics, but more so like newspaper comics, things like your Peanuts. Calvin and Hobbes was a really, really big one for me. And so for a while, I was kind of picturing that as like a dream job to work in like the Sunday Funny paper or something like that. And then my parents got hold of this and they sat me down and had a conversation. They're like, Aiden, this is not a job that has much of a future panned out for you. You should probably choose something safer a stronger career path. And I took that information, I digested it, thought about it for a while, and decided to pick animation, which doesn't really, I mean, it's better than working in the, the funny pages, but it's like it's a little bit risky still. It's not a super safe career choice, but I guess it ultimately worked out. But I felt like there's a lot of similarity between drawing, especially comics, to animation, where in a way it's kind of the same thing. You're telling stories through time using images, a lot of the same techniques for framing, composition, character design, narrative, all these things kind of like roll up together in a big package to be essentially what animation becomes. And even if you want to work in animation, there's literally a job called a storyboard artist, which the role of the storyboard artist is to, before the animation is done, make the comic book version of that animation so that we have like an outline plan of what we're supposed to do ahead of time. So super merged, intertwined fields, I guess.
Was there a in what you're doing now, is there a type of animation that you like to specialize in that you prefer overall?
The real cop out answer is that I like animation and I like getting shots that feel honest in a way.
Hmm.
But I think that's going to really lean towards acting, emotional, something where it's like we're revealing something true about the character. And that's gonna usually be like crying shots and people like confessing things that they've been bottling up inside. But it can be way broader than that. But I think the big thing that irks me about any sort of single like animation choice, like the animation choice is wrong if it betrays something about the character. And so that's the kind of thing that like I don't know, that I hate to see in animation. I'm going to be drawn to something that I feel is more true.
Mm-hmm. Oh, great, thank you. And Mike, similar questions. What got you into animation?
I've always wanted to be an animator since like middle school, but I didn't know animation was a thing like when I was that young. I just knew I wanted to work in cartoons of some capacity. So then I kind of geared my learning towards that, went to Alfred and all that stuff. But the thing that because I wanted to work in specifically visual effects, so like what I'm doing now, and the thing that got me into going down that path was um, I really like seeing creatures being brought to life and having seeing like their emotion like come out, and I just think it's incredible. Like take like Life of Pi, for example, the tiger in Life of Pi, an incredible film, amazing animation, the way that that tiger was brought to life. So that's kind of what drew me more to visual effects was like all the creatures, getting the weight right, getting the performance of like a cat or a dog, and kind of what Aiden was saying with like the emotion of the characters. But for me, the big thing is getting that pulling that emotion out of animals and
Mhm.
getting that right. So that's what got me towards trying to get into the visual effects side of things.
Yeah,
And
it's
it's
got to be a lot harder getting like the emotional out of animals because like for people like we can emote, we can talk, we can like literally say how we feel. But if you're dealing with like a creature or an animator, it's like
It's all
you got to
body
know
language.
that creature so much better to be able
yeah,
to like get something like that across.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, that what got me into it. And then the movie that actually sealed the deal for me was Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows when the
Oh,
dragon breaks through the bank.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Blew my mind when I saw it, and I was like, "Yep, that is what I need to do with my life." And so
do you have like a favorite part of animation? Is a specific part in the process that you just if someone's asking who wants to do it, you're the first one to volunteer.
like like my favorite part of the process of animating. Is what you
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
It's definitely so when you're animating a character, it's a long process. It's not easy, but there's always a moment when the shot is close to final. You're putting in the polish, the last 10%, where you step back and you look at your shot and you look at the character or the creature, whatever you're doing, and you're like that character is alive. Like I can feel the emotion coming through the screen. Um, and that is my favorite part of animating is finally seeing that character come to life. And then once it gets through like texturing and rendering and lighting and all of the other steps involved, and then you see the final product, then there's no other feeling in the world than seeing.
So when you saw your fat dragon run up against the wall, like, how did that make you feel?
It was pretty cool. My shots on that were pretty fast, but it was still cool to see the guy trying to struggle, ride the struggle bus to get out of the cave on that one.
Mike, when you had told me about your work for Chip and Dale, I remember joining a watch party with Aiden and a bunch of peeps from Alfred, and we're like, "Go, Mike! Yeah!"
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. That's fun.
That goes on for way too long.
It sure does.
But no, I that was just a small detail of life, and I'm like, hey, that's cool.
Yeah, that came out a year ago, right?
Yeah, that was a while ago.
So,
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, that was a fun movie to work on. It was a lot of technical stuff going on with making Chip look like he's a 2D person, but he's actually a 3D rig. All that stuff. It was definitely an experience to work in that film.
What kind of tools do you use for that?
What kind of what?
Tools.
So as an animator, we use Maya.
Okay.
And that's pretty standard across the industry. I think they use other tools like Nuke for compositing, and I think like Mari for texturing, stuff like that. But as an animator, we stick with Maya to do all the cool animation stuff.
Are there any specific tools or programs that either you guys know how to use really well? I know that Aiden, you talked a bit about the rotoscoping stuff you were a part of. Was there any specialized learning? There
was. There was a program called Nuke that I had to learn. It was very much I started on that internship the first day. I was thinking like, I'm going to use Maya, do some animation stuff like that. And then my boss comes in the room. He's like, Aiden, here's a program called Nuke. Can you learn this in an hour?
You've got the codes.
I didn't learn the program in an hour, but I did enough to get the job done in an hour. And he's like, cool, you have a job. So really on the fly there for that sort of thing. But I probably haven't touched Nuke since then. It's been years. I can't say I really know the program because all I know is how to do this very specific task. And even looking back on it, like there's a lot of talk about like AI these days. And I feel like for stuff like animation, it's like kind of very difficult to get AI to do animation. But I'm pretty sure AI probably could have done that job really good, especially hey, here's the puppets, get rid of the wires. I feel like that's something it probably is very good at, especially with like the whole like Photoshop content aware fill that's getting really, really good these days that at the very least you could probably do it in a fraction of the time.
Maybe the more nuanced stuff definitely requires a more steady hand.
Yeah, and I don't want to see a computer try to act at this point. I feel like it's not going to come across really well in some of the subtleties and stuff like that.
Can you imagine the horrors?
Yeah, oh goodness. But if you just want to tell a computer like, hey, there's a wire, delete that wire, you could probably do an all right job. We don't really care about what's behind the wire too much. It's probably going to be all right. At least for now. We'll see how it is in 5 more years.
Can always touch it up.
Yeah.
Mike, any other tools you've used specifically for any projects? I mean, anything specifically for some of those, VFX kind of stuff?
Not really. I usually stick with Maya to do pretty much everything. What?
So I think I got a good one. Mike, you and I before we started kind of had a little bit of a fanboy moment over our shared teacher we had, Mr. Petnati over at Boase's. Yes. Because of that guy, I had access to tools like Maya, and that was my first time being able and exposed to such software and have the opportunity to engage with such stuff. When was the first time both of you actually had an opportunity to engage in these fields, even if it's something so far back as, publishing something like, like a comic strip, like you were talking about earlier, Aiden, or being a fan of your Calvin and Hobbes stuff?
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. Mike, do you want to
either of you can answer that. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. So I got my feet wet in Blender in like 2008. So it was an old version of Blender, and it was in Mr. P's class. And every time, we would finish a project, and if I had downtime, I would just open up Blender, because at the time he didn't have specific 3D classes. He just really encouraged me to do it. So they downloaded Blender, and the first ever project I did was a model of a wine glass, and I rendered it, but at the time I didn't know what rendering actually was. So I hit the render button, and I couldn't figure out how to view it because I didn't know that I had to put all the images together. So I don't know how that project turned out because I couldn't figure it out. I didn't know. That was my first ever 3D project with a wine glass.
I started with the exact same thing. 2015, I think, for me, Blender. The nice thing about Blender is just it's free. So like if you're a kid and you just want to experiment, you're like, oh, I could make a cartoon. How hard could that be, or something like that? Blender would be a really good option for that. You'll probably be led down a pipeline where everyone who starts with Blender seems to make donuts these days.
I was just going to say, we've moved on from wine to the donuts, and I still have
donuts. It's a very, very big thing. And the nice thing about it is there's a really, really good community for learning with Blender. A lot of tutorials on YouTube, a lot of good forums for all these different things. It's not so much used in the industry. There's like the odd project where you'll find that Blender becomes useful for something like that. Actually, right before this, I was at Sony Imageworks. I didn't work on it, but I was there at the same time when they were putting together Across the Spider-Verse. And they actually used Blender for a very specific tool in the production where they would animate the scenes in Maya and then export that scene into Blender to use, I think it's called the grease pencil. I might be wrong about that. It's been a while since I've used Blender, just to get some like hand-drawn line effects and then bring those line effects back into Maya for the rest of their pipeline. So every once in a while it becomes useful in the industry. But I always recommend it as like a beginner learning software that if you really want to work in the industry, you're probably going to have to transfer to Maya at some point. But no harm whatsoever in Blender whatsoever. It's great, especially at the beginning.
In a similar... Go ahead.
Sorry, Brent. Yeah, I was going to say, on top of what Aiden was talking about, because I've messed with Blender now, like 2023 version, and they made some awesome tools within that program. It's only going to get better.
It's come a long way.
For sure, especially with like rendering and lighting and stuff. Like I don't really know how to do that well, but in Blender I can make my animations look way better than I could in Maya, just because of the rendering tools that they have.
Yeah, I think they have like a built-in denoiser or something like that. Yeah. And I think that's like, oh, that should be like a no-brainer for like any render engine. But I think what's the one? Arnold. I don't think Arnold Renderer has that, which is like the default renderer for Maya.
Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate for those who might not be familiar with the terminology?
Yeah, so rendering for the first part will be actually, if anyone's familiar with video games, they might be familiar with what's the term? Where does the photorealistic lighting, real-time rendering. I don't even remember the terminology. Anyways, the idea is that when you render an image in a computer, you're running a simulation of the lighting to get very complex bounces in the scene. That what makes light look real is, the light comes into a room, bounces against the wall, bounces against my face, and that makes really subtle changes into the way the light works. So that's going to be the rendering aspect of it. And then I mentioned a denoiser in the renderer. That one's way more straightforward. We're using that computer power to render out an image. And then as we're doing so, it's going to be very noisy at first, a lot of like particular specks and artifacts all over the place. And just a denoiser would be a built-in way of getting rid of that, I guess, noise.
Like TV static.
Yeah, exactly. Like getting rid of the static in a process way. Yeah. I mean, we're animators. We don't technically touch the rendering side of things too often. There's a whole other department for lighting, rendering, texturing, all these different things. So we're just a very narrow slice of the pie.
There's a lot of layers that go into these projects.
Absolutely. It's goodness, if you've ever like watched one of these, like especially like a Marvel movie, a big VFX project, once you get to the end credits, and it goes through all these separate studios, and you see all the names passing up. I remember when I was a kid, when I was seeing that like block of names, it just seemed like insane, like how they could justify so many people working on a project. But now that I'm in the industry, working in the studios, it's like, oh, it makes sense. We really need that many people. We probably could use more, if anything.
Yeah, true.
Can you outline a couple of those layers for us?
Yeah. I could actually, I could do like beginning to end, very, very broad. I'm probably going to skip over some stuff. So apologies for any department that I don't touch up on. But beginning, you're going to start with a storyboard, which, as I was talking before, it's kind of like a comic book version of the film. From a storyboard, then you're going to enter your pre-production phase, which will include concept art, get an idea of what the film will look like. You might start doing modeling, which is the idea is you're going to create the geometry, the shape, the form, kind of like you're sculpting the characters, the environments, anything, any props that you need. Those props will need textures, so a texturing or a lighting department will work on applying different painting and surfacing materials to any sort of items that you make. That goes to rigging, which will take, say, actually, I'll use a puppet metaphor. Imagine you have a puppet. That puppet needs strings to make it dance, make it move. That's what the rigging department does. So they're going to insert bones into the characters to allow an animator to then take that puppet, grab the marionette, start moving it around. They're the one that actually makes the movement happen on the puppet. After that, lighting, rendering will take that image and apply realistic light into your scene to get it, more of a fuller image. I probably skipped some departments, but that's kind of like the base outline, I imagine. Unless Mike, you got anything to add?
No, I think that covers most of it. I think one, at least in visual effects, I'm assuming it's the same for feature too, is like
Yeah.
CFX and
Oh, yeah,
effects
yeah.
and stuff like that. There's an entire department for doing hair and fur and like cloth simulations and stuff like that. Obviously, there's a department for big explosions, water. All of that is generally grouped under like effects or CFX or something similar to that. That's
Yeah.
another aspect of the pipeline too.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, I was watching Monsters Incorporated, and like that was like a really big deal about like the fur on the characters, like characters like Sully and stuff like that. I was under the impression at the time that every hair was hand animated in the sense that there was a guy whose job it was to move every single particle of fur or something like that. Thankfully, it's not like that. I mean, it's still a very, very challenging job, but you don't have to babysit every single follicle.
I
They didn't
quit.
get to that till
Yeah.
they didn't get to that till Tangled or whichever one it was.
Oh yeah, Tangled was like a big nightmare of a production because at the time a lot of the hair technology wasn't that good. I think did they invent XGen for that project?
Yeah,
I think
that
I
was
might be
kind
wrong.
of. I remember that being a big
Yeah,
shitty deal because they were like, "Oh, well, every strand of hair is individualized," and it's like that seems like a lot of fucking work. But and when I hear you
yeah,
guys talking about, I mean, not only are there layers to this, but then there are layers to those layers. I mean, yeah, it makes sense that you would want every strand of hair to be individual because you've got a lot more ability to manipulate it the way you want. And it seems like there's a lot of precision that goes into so much of this
yeah.
stuff.
Especially on a production like Tangled, because I'm pretty sure in the movie she grabs her hair, she'll like use it as a rope,
Oh, she's
and then has a
she's
grappling
throwing it
hook
all over
and
the
swinging
place.
around on the hair and everything
And then
like
they
that.
cop out because
That's
they turn her into like a bear halfway through. Not even.
yeah, you
It's like,
probably couldn't
okay,
just use like a simulation for that sort of thing. We're asking a lot out of the computer at that point. We gotta,
right.
but yeah, that was a
Yeah.
crazy production.
So I got a question. I'll aim it at Mike first. What's been either the most challenging thing to learn or the most rewarding thing to learn or maybe the most rewarding project you worked on or the most challenging project, something along those lines?
Um, most I think like most challenging thing to learn, honestly, is just like animating in general because it's not easy. It takes a long time to wrap your head around the principles and how to view reference the right way. And it took me a while to actually get good enough to be in the industry.
How many years
And
might you say?
like 6 or 7.
Okay.
Yeah, for me personally, just because animation didn't come easy to me. I really had to work hard to figure it out. Once I did, then obviously I was able to get into the industry. But even now, I'm still learning some cool tips and workflow stuff that helps out with my work. But that's probably the one biggest challenge I had was actually learning the skill to get to be an animator.
Getting all the foundational stuff.
Mhm. And then the other part of your question was the most challenging project I've been on. Was that it?
Or most rewarding project, yeah.
Okay. I think the most challenging one was the one I just finished at Spin, which I can't say what it is, but it was very tough. There's a lot of overtime, a lot of crunch hours. The rigs we were using were insane, just thousands and thousands of controls for the face and the body.
We'll have to get an update when you can talk about that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll have to come back and break some news.
Yeah, I'll let you know when I can talk about it. But it's definitely the most challenging one was the one I was just on for sure, and
Okay,
the
well,
most rewarding, I will say too.
So
Because it
do
looks
the next.
amazing.
So then do the next one since you can't talk about that one.
The next challenging one.
Yeah.
Chippendale for sure. Yeah, for the same reasons. My project I was just talking about was Chippendale like on steroids, but the same technical issues.
Chippendale 2, Chippendale on steroids.
Essentially, yeah.
He was trying to give us a hint.
Do you think Chip or Dale is the one who starts doing them first?
Yeah.
That was the secret project.
What's that?
That's the secret project is Chip and Dale 2. That's the one you can't talk about.
Chippendale
Specifically
2.
on steroids, yeah.
I think Dale does the steroids first.
That's
He
the
gets
name of
addicted.
it, Chippendale on
Yeah.
steroids.
Yeah.
Yeah. But with Chippendale, the main challenge again was getting the rigs to do what we wanted them to do, because there were so many controls on those things. Like the face on Chip had, I don't know this for certain. I'm just guessing that there was 1,000 controls just on his face, because there were so many micro movers and things we had to manipulate to get the 2D animation to look right. So that was a huge challenge on that one. Then just like the schedule of the project and trying to get it done on time. A lot of crunch time, overtime to get it out the door. So that was how that one went. But it was a lot of fun. The team that I was with was amazing. They were all super talented, and it was really rewarding, really challenging.
How many months of overtime was there on that?
I think so. When I got put on Chippendale, it was my first week at NPC, and then the week after that, they announced we were doing overtime, and it was like that pretty much till the end of the project. So I think like 6 months.
6 months. Yeah.
7 months.
I know NPC is a very difficult studio too. That like they'll get a lot of newcomers to the industry, and they'll work them dry right when they start. Right.
Yes, sir. That is the thing.
Not to divert your answer to Steve's question, Mike, but you both talked about that like that was an inside joke.
I was waiting for
amongst insiders. Is your workload and the amount of overtime put on you guys, is that just pretty much expected at this point when you're in your field?
There's no secret that that crunch is very common, not just in animation, but in a lot of creative industries. It's a lot of overworking, a lot of overtime. I mean, 6 months. I mean, how many hours of overtime? I can't imagine.
Yeah. It happens in the industry. It's kind of unavoidable. There's a lot of factors that go into why it happens. It's not just like one thing. But a lot of times, where animation isn't just a job that you get just because, right? Everybody working in the industry is there because they want to be there, and they want their work to be as good as it possibly can. So they're kind of more willing to do it. But yeah, it's just kind of part of the industry.
Mm-hmm. I've been, I guess, relatively blessed that so far I've had like a minimal amount of overtime that I actually have had to do so far. But like I know it's all over the place. It's usually going to be like the last third of any production is going to be crunched because, like you're saying, any number of things that can go wrong in the process or something like that. At least luckily in Canada, where I'm at right now, it's like we get paid pretty well for those overtime hours. It's like 1.5 times the normal rate just as a basis. I don't know how it is at Spin or any other studio, not to make it specific to Spin, but like studios in the United States, if they like pay better for overtime hours or if it's like the same rate or something like that.
No, yeah, we get paid pretty well for the overtime.
Okay,
sure.
Cool. At least for that. That's like, usually like you would want the productions to be smoother and to like avoid overtime if they can, but at the very least, given the compensation of like a higher salary than the normal rate for those hours, that at least makes it like, okay, I can live with this and maybe treat it as like an end of the year bonus or something like that.
Yeah,
But you definitely want to avoid it wherever possible.
yeah, definitely for sure. And yeah, it's 6 months of overtime definitely wears on you. That's kind of
That's a lot.
a lot
Yeah.
of overtime on that. But it's fun. If I didn't like it, I wouldn't be doing it. So something to put up
All
with.
right. And I think Aiden, you still have to answer Steve's batch of questions.
Yeah, you do.
Oh, about the challenging
Challenging or
project you worked
rewarding.
on?
Challenging or
Yeah.
rewarding, or maybe it is both.
Yeah, well, it's also the bad answer. The most challenging project I've worked on is the one I'm on right now. So give me like 6 months and I'll talk about it. But after that, the next most challenging would have been Ant-Man Quantumania. Just on like a level of like scale where when I remember like the first day I started on a project, my animation director sat me down. He was like, okay, cool. Really excited about this Ant-Man project. Our goal is to try to make this, for context, at Sony, we worked on specifically the final battle of that scene or of that movie. So again, spoilers, but for anyone who hasn't seen it, the end of the movie involves Paul Rudd, Ant-Man, is trying to rescue his daughter from the evil Kang. He turns himself into Giant Man and starts stomping, kicking through the Kang's fortress city of Chronopolis to try and rescue them. So that's involving like lots of armies of soldiers, lots of armies of ants, lots of gun turrets and spaceships and giant superheroes and
big
stuff
old
like
guy
that.
walking right down the middle of it.
Exactly. Yeah. Some of my favorite shots are just like the ones of like kick through a wall, punch a turret, stuff like that. Just like those fun physical things. But anyways, on my first day, animation director sits me down. He says like, okay, what we're doing here is we're going to try and make this the scale of say an Avengers movie, but we're going to do it in 1/3 of the time. So it was
God,
very, very busy. But then again, luckily only 2 months of overtime. So relatively that's pretty good. I think, I was on that project for, I think, 8 months at Sony, and only 2 of them were overtime months. So, on the whole, it was kind of like shocking how much we were able to do with so little time, I suppose.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
It says a lot that the studios that you guys find yourselves working for keep wanting to just beat their prior goal. I mean, it's like looking at the highest grossing property and film release in like world history and going, but I want more.
Yeah, well, especially in visual effects, a lot of that is because they're working with clients. So I mentioned I was working at Sony, right? But for some people that might know, Sony doesn't actually own Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. That's not actually their movie. So we were working as a client for Marvel, where Marvel will go to a whole bunch of different visual effects studios and have them bid to get different contracts on different parts of the movie. And a lot of that tends to be a little bit of a race to the bottom in terms of like the studio will say, okay, we can do it in less time than the other guy, and we could do it for cheaper than the other guy. And so that's where a lot of the pressure comes for a lot of visual effects things to get things done as quickly, as cheaply as possible for these studios, which in a sense makes sense because these are things have massive budgets with a ton of risk attached to them, where like if a movie ends up flopping, they could potentially lose out on millions and millions of dollars. They cannot afford to miss a release date. So there's a lot riding on these things.
Yeah, that's completely understandable. It is curious. What do both of you make of the fact that it seems like these studios, these larger companies like take Disney, owner of Marvel, needing so many subcontracted studios for these projects? Like if you look back through credits of older films, back when animation in its earlier days, maybe 2, maybe 3, sometimes 4 studios, and typically they were each handling specific things like audio engineering or whatever. But now, like this is a video game, but it just comes to mind, like Halo Infinite had something like 70 different companies that had worked on it by the end of it. It almost seems like that would be harder to manage. Do you guys ever find that with the projects you're working on that there's ever any like friction between these other companies that you have to work with to get these projects done?
Well, we don't. Usually we just talk with the client about stuff. We're not. So, for instance, if Spin and like Scanline are working on the same project, usually they're not going back and forth between each other. It's usually going through the client, and then the client's making the decisions and then telling us, the studio, what to do.
And it's not like, you know, your studio and the other studio are working on the same part even.
Yeah, usually that's what Aiden was talking about with like the bidding process. So
Right.
if again, I'm just using Spin as an example because I work for them, but
Sure.
if Spin got bid out like the ending chunk of Avengers 25 or whatever, and then Scanline got the middle section, Digital Domain might get the beginning. That's what they're working on. That's what the client's paying them for. They're not working on the same section all at once.
Yeah, and
That's usually
at least in my experience, there's never been like conflict between the studios so much. Really, it's like if the client itself has like an unrealistic deadline or something like that, or just mismanagement in general might cause production things. But if anything, at least in my personal opinion, the one thing that would make things so much better is if they just like extended some of these timelines just a little bit, give a little bit of breathing room to even put out a better product in the end. But I don't know exactly how to arrive there because
We don't want another
it's
Sonic
so
the Hedgehog.
competitive. Yeah.
No, yeah, they unfortunately they've got quarterly earnings that they have to send out the door, you know.
Yeah.
So we're running on their time.
Probably a whole lot more that goes into that I'm not privy
Yeah,
to.
no, I mean, you know, your guns are aimed a little too high. Your metaphorical guns, I should say.
Yeah, but also at the same time, I think of like a movie like I'm pretty sure like the highest grossing movie last year would have been like Avatar 2, right? Unless I'm mistaken. And that movie, it's like, how many years did they have for the visual effects on that one? Like at least from the outside, it seems like they gave it some breathing room. I don't know anyone at Weta, so
isn't the whole like trilogy basically complete? I thought from what I understood from the production legends at least is that like Cameron's been working on all of the Avatar films at like the same time or some crazy nonsense.
Yeah. So like that's going to be true, but like that only means so much. Where working on a project, there's so many different levels of working on a project.
Yeah.
Where like he's probably filmed things for like the next movie and the next movie after, but like visual effects and animation, very much still in the process. There's definitely people still like putting all those things together. But I think you're right. I did hear from like one person that like recorded some roles for I think the previous Avatar movie, and like they recorded it years ago. And when the movie came out, they were like surprised, like, oh wait a minute, I was in this one. I totally forgot.
Heard that too.
Yeah.
Well, we are getting pretty close to the end here. We're at about a 52-minute mark. So
I got another question, unless you got something to wrap it
well,
up.
no,
with.
I have a wrap-up question, and it's perfect because we're now getting another notice.
We got 10 minutes left, guys.
So, Steve,
Quick answers.
go ahead and ask. Go ahead and ask your question.
Well, my question was going to be for each of you. What's like the dream project to work on someday? Whether it's a personal thing or whatever.
dream project?
What's the dream project?
What I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
No
Okay.
way. That's
Dream
so good.
achieved. So after
You gotta
this,
get another
after
dream.
this, we'll have to
Yeah, I know, you got to get a new one now.
Yeah.
That's a nice problem to have.
Yeah. Well, now I really want to know. So
Yeah,
I'm
me
excited
too.
for a few months from now. I can ask you all about it. Yeah, that's true.
That's my answer.
Okay,
All
hey,
right,
it
Aiden,
works.
how about you?
Yeah. My dream project was canceled. A couple of years ago, there was Netflix had a whole bunch of different animated projects they were running through. I used to be a massive fan of this graphic novel called Bone. It was a really big deal in like scholastic book fairs and stuff like that. Netflix was going to do an adaptation of that, and that would have been my dream project. Recently got canceled, and so the dream is dead.
Can I get that dream? Can I get that dream boneless?
Oh, oh God, Steve.
Got boned on that one.
No. So, I think that's actually a very good question because I was going to ask something similar, so I'll change it up. If you were to go back in time or talk to a young animator, what direction would you give them? And I'll start with...
What would you say to yourself when you were like first like, oh, I want to be an animator?
Yeah, I feel like we're going back in time to give a young animator instructions. It's got to be ourselves because I couldn't imagine like going back in time to like Walt Disney and telling him like, "Hey, this is what you got to do. All right, listen to me here."
I know.
So I'll let you take it away, Aiden. What would you do if you were to go back and talk to yourself?
Back in time, talking to myself, I would probably tell myself to specialize. I think at the time I was not sure about what it meant to be an animator, and so I was kind of grasping at straws of like, oh, okay, well, an animator, they make animated movies, right? So I guess I'm gonna spend like a year learning how to model characters. Now that I'm at Disney and I'm like working my job, I do zero modeling whatsoever. And since it's such a competitive industry, if you want to get hired, you want to stand out, a lot of that really does come down to the specialization of saying, I've been focusing on animation specifically, or I've been focused on rigging for the past year, 2 years, 3 years, made a specific portfolio that's geared towards that specific thing. You're probably more likely to stand out because of that dedication in that specific avenue. So I would go back in time, tell myself to focus, specialize. That would be the idea.
Okay. And Mike?
Almost the same as what Aiden just said. I will add to it. I also think that it's important to, as when you're training to be an animator, to focus on the concepts, not so much the software, because the software will always change. And you can usually, if you learn Maya or Blender or whatever, you can hop into something else and generally pick it up kind of quickly-ish. But if you don't know the underlying concepts behind being an animator, it doesn't matter. You're not going to get hired. You're not going to get the job. So that's what I would tell myself is focus on everything Aiden said, but on top of that, focus on learning the principles and the concepts of being an animator.
Yeah, I'm so nervous because like right now at work we're using Maya, but next year they're going to switch out our animation software. There's like a proprietary one from Pixar called Presto, and we're all going to have to learn it.
Yeah,
I've been using Maya for like 6 or 7 years now, so the idea of just doing something different is like, oh no, all my key bindings are going to be different.
I bet Presto is amazing though.
I'm sure it's great. I'm sure it's fantastic. I'm just going to hate the entire process of adjusting.
I bet.
Yeah, but once you get there.
Yeah, once I get there, I'll question how I ever did anything without it.
Well, thank you guys very much for everything. I'll start with you, Mike. If you could tell us where anyone can find your online work, and then I'll jump to Aiden.
LinkedIn, all of my online stuff is on LinkedIn, which is just my name, Mike Hanchett. You can connect with me on there. If there's any like students who want me to see their work, just send me a message. I'm always glad to look at people's work and stuff too. Just throwing that out there.
Okay, thank you. And Aiden?
Yeah, similarly, I'm on LinkedIn. Probably better to you can reach me on LinkedIn or Instagram. I post as much of my work as I can on both of them. So it'd be under Aidan Wilson, AIDAN, and then Wilson is pretty self-explanatory. And similarly, students and stuff like that, animators, they're friendly people. We like to help. So anything we got, anything
Never met an animator who didn't like talking about their work or anybody else's work. So
yeah, no, especially their own work. Animators love talking about their work.
Yeah, for sure.